All right. Do you fall in any of these two categories? Number one, you want to leave America and you want to try your luck in another country. Or maybe number two, you're someone that's interested in either visiting or living in Africa. What if I told you that there's a way to do that, but I think the best way to do it may not be the way you think it is. So, for example, if I were interested in living in Africa, here's a couple of issues that you have to consider. Number one, you do have to rough it a lot when you live in Africa. Number two, you have to consider the fact that Africa to Africa travel is pretty expensive. And number three, it could be a big culture shock. Okay, so here's something, a different alternative that a lot of people don't talk about. This is living in the GCC, which is, in other words, you may know it as the Middle East. So this is something that I do, and I happen to live in the Middle East, and I found out that I like it a whole lot more than I thought, and then number two, I found it more convenient if I'm someone that's interested in leaving America and even checking out Africa. And let me explain why. Anyway, before I get into that, I'm Expat D. I'm a traveler. I've been traveling since 2002, and I've been over 35 different countries. And I give travel content, and I make videos to help with your transition moving abroad, if that is you. I do understand that these videos aren't for everybody. You don't have to be someone that is interested in living abroad, but if you are that person, then this video should resonate with you. So here's the thing. Here's my number one point. This is something I noticed, is that when you live in certain countries and you want to stay long, you're either going to change as a person a great deal, or you may find a situation that's a little bit more balanced. So here's one thing I keep in mind when I've lived in Africa, or when I've traveled to Africa, and I've been to, I think, 6 African countries. I love Africa, by the way, but I do acknowledge that you do have to rough it to a certain extent in Africa, and of course that varies from African country to African country. You may experience things like crazy traffic. You may experience situations where you can't drink the water, you can't eat the vegetables. You may experience situations where the power goes out. So these are all realities of living in Africa. And this is something that, at least me being in the GCC, it's a very familiar transition. You'll find a lot of similarities if you're coming from America that make it a lot easier to transition abroad. A lot of times I forget. I forget that I'm in another country because there's a lot of familiarities, and that's important. What I notice, and I've lived in several different countries, not just traveled, lived. So I'll give an example. When I lived in China, when you have to go without certain things, it will make you miss back home. You know, if you're used to getting one thing that I missed when I was in China, it was like soda pop. Now, it's not to say that they don't have soda pop there, but there's certain varieties, you know, like if you want a good root beer or something, you may drink that, like, oh yeah, man, I'm back home, right? It'll make you feel like you miss it. Now, when you're here in the Middle East, you find that and I'll get into this later in this video, you'll find there's a lot of stuff that's here that reminds you of the States. And here's the thing, I know a lot of you guys are going to say, like, I didn't go abroad to find America again. I understand that, but it's nice to also have that option. when you are abroad, there's peaks and valleys. There's times where you miss home a little bit. There's times that you're really excited being abroad, and there's times where you feel a little bit like lonely, and you feel like you get a little homesick. And when you live in places like where I'm at now, like in the Middle East, you you don't feel it as much. At least I don't, because there's a lot of things that I find I spend my weekends here very similar to how I spend them in the States, as far as like activity wise. I'll give you an example, and that gets to my next point. They've got nice malls and shopping. I mean, some of the best malls I've ever been to, they've been in the Middle East. I mean, I freaking awesome. I mean, the design, all that stuff, really, really good. And then shopping is good. A lot of you're not missing out on a lot of things that you would want to buy in the States. You can find it here. The one thing they don't have is they don't have as good as like a secondhand market as the States. Like if you were to try to like buy something on like an eBay or an Amazon that may be secondhand, or I'm not necessarily going to say thrift shops. I mean, that's not really as big of a thing here. But the fact that you a lot of times when I've been in other countries, I found that I had to leave in order to really go shopping like I wanted to. And there's you could shop pretty well here in the Middle East. Yeah, nice malls, shopping, things like they have like the equivalent. They have like an equivalent of like a Best Buy, if you know what I'm saying, in the States. They have like an equivalent of that here. Um, they have your Foot Lockers, they have your Nike outlets, all these type of things. When they have that abroad, it just makes it a lot more easy to cope with. All right. Beyond that, let's continue. So one thing that I really stuck out to me, and this actually happened on the way to Africa when I was living in China. I remember when I lived in China, we my family went to visit Ethiopia, and living from China, it was actually cheaper to book. And this is getting more into like travel hacks though, but it was cheaper for me to get a round trip ticket to Dubai, and then from Dubai get a round trip ticket to Ethiopia. Right? That was saved. I almost saved like $1,000 doing that, but it allowed me to stay over in Dubai. So I remember I stayed over. We stayed over in Dubai, and we went to the. Ironically, we went to the mall in Dubai, and I looked and I was like, wait, what? It was diverse. This is the closest thing that I mean, of course, outside of Europe, this is the closest thing that had reminded me of the States. I saw like kids hanging out. It was like, you know, African American kids, African kids, Arab kids, Asian kids, white kids, European, Australian, like whatever you want to put it. And I was just like, whoa, like I haven't seen that level of diversity outside of America in a while. And being someone that had a child abroad, I was like, man, I would like him to go to a school setting like that where he's, it's really like foreign and diverse. And so that's something that I saw that was my first taste of that. And it really stuck out to me. I was like, man, like that's the elements I was interested in finding abroad. When you have children, of course, someone that, you can get in a setting where there's a lot of diversity. That's something I've always liked about America. And it was so cool to see that outside of America. Okay, my next point is restaurants. Um, I try to eat healthy, right? But if you ever want to enjoy yourself, you ever want a cheat meal, have a birthday or celebration or something like that, they've got around the corner from me, there is Cinnabon. Okay. They have, it's kind of an, okay, they have kind of a knockoff version of Chick-fil-A around the corner. They've got Hardee's or Carl's Jr., depending on what region of the state you're living in. All that stuff. They've got a Cheesecake Factory, um, Applebee's, Chili's. I mean, all this, basically all the chains that you're used to in the States, they have that here. So a lot of times what I've done in the States, like to enjoy myself, you could get that here. And so that really helps you when that level of familiarity. Now, of course, you don't have to, if you want more like the local experience, they've got that too. And they do that pretty well. But if you want to do something where you kind of miss home a little bit and you want that taste of home, they have that here and they do it very well. So that's something to consider. See, here's the thing. When you live abroad, and let's say you go somewhere like Africa, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. You may feel like that for the first couple of months. Eventually, you might have some moments where you're like, man, I sure would like to go to like a restaurant that you miss back home. Or have like a certain experience that you had back home. And when you can't get that, it starts making you miss being back more and more. But if you're living in a place that has a lot of those things, it makes you even forget. Like when I lived in other places, I used to always constantly think about America. Now, I honestly, I really don't, because I've have so many things that I like that's here. It doesn't really make you, it doesn't feel like you're gone. Of course, like the people around you are different. But when you have those similar experiences, a lot of times I don't even notice. Okay, here's another thing I'm going to get to. This is very important. Cheap airfare. So, okay, when you have cheap airfare, particularly to East Africa, I can get to a lot of East African countries for about $400, $400, $500. I can probably get to about, a handful, maybe a little bit more than a handful of African countries, which is so cool. Now, if you're in Africa itself, it almost costs like I've made other videos about this. It almost costs the same amount of money to go one country over than it'll cost me to come from the Middle East to Africa, at least to East Africa. So if you find yourself there, and you like I'll give you an example. When you're in Southeast Asia, man, you could country hop. You can go Thailand, Malaysia. You can go Thailand, Vietnam, Thailand. There's a lot of other countries, Laos, even Thailand, Philippines. All that is like around, like under $200. Bali. There's a gang. So when I was in Asia, I used to travel and go to a bunch of Southeast Asian countries because it was cheap to get to. And you got a chance to see a lot. Some people go to Africa and they think, because of course, people that go there, particularly those that are like Black African American, they may think like, oh, I want to see different countries to see which one resonates with me more. But if you go and then you're like, hey, wait a minute, I want to see what another country looks like. It's crazy expensive just thinking about how close it is to the next country and how much you have to pay. Like literally, if I go from the Middle East to East Africa, that might be I have to look it up. It might be like a 5-hour flight, 7-hour flight. I have to look up do the travel math on that. But if you go just to a country over, it might be an hour and a half flight. I'm paying the same price. So the fact that you can live in a place that it's a little bit easier to transition to, and you could fly to the next country, that's a better deal to me. Now, of course, once you find that country that you really like in Africa, you may want to transition to that. But this is a good plan, being in the Middle East for that reason. Another one, driving. A lot of I've driven in a lot of different countries. Africa is a little bit more wild with driving, just in terms of like the traffic rules, like not having a stop sign, those type of things. Where in the Middle East, I have a car, a drive, and I'm not saying like the driving is perfect. They have some wild driving here, but for the most part, and I'd say where I'm at is probably one on the wilder side of the GCC, but just in general driving, you can do it. You know, you can have a car, you can drive, you can be independent. Sometimes it gets on my nerves when you travel to countries and you're totally dependent on taxis. Sometimes they scam you, you know, sometimes like they don't speak good English, so you have a hard time like getting picked up or getting dropped off in the right spot and da 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 da. But just having that level of independence of having your own vehicle and being able to get around, that is, man, that's great. You know, sometimes it's raining or the weather is bad. It's nice to just be able to hop in your car and get to where you got to get to. Okay, so yeah, just establishing that level of independence. That's excellent. Okay, next we're going to look at groceries. Okay, and delivery apps. So it's so nice to be able to get some foods that you like from the grocery store that you're familiar with. And then, of course, there's also ones that are new and it's an adventure. So having that mix of both is something that you can get here in the Middle East. I mean, you know, I've seen all kind of things pop up at the grocery store. I've seen like A&W root beer. I've seen the zero one. I've seen just a lot of different products and stuff that I'm like, oh my God, they have that here, right? And that's exciting to get that feeling of back home. And then also, if you have, particular dietary needs, you can have that met. It's great, and they do that pretty well here in the Middle East. Also having delivery apps, equivalent to like Uber Eats. They have that here. And so you have that level of convenience. I'm not saying that doesn't exist in some African countries do it, some don't. But the fact that it's here, you'll find yourself living a pretty like comfortable life in the Middle East. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is a good trend. Like when you're coming from the States, it's a good transition. I didn't come here directly from the States. I paid my dues. I paid my dues, I tell you. I ended up in, I started I did start in Africa. I went to China. So I saw like the transition and how it was a lot more difficult. And when I came here, I said, wow, I didn't know it could be like this, you know? All right, next. So you got the grocery delivery apps. And then the last thing I want to mention is you can get paid. See, the thing is, in a lot of African countries, and see, most people, what they'll tell you on these videos is that if you want to live abroad, forget getting a job, right? But actually, you can't. That's what I work. I have a job here. And so the good thing is, in a lot of these GCC countries, you get paid. I make about what I get paid in the States. However, when you count in like having housing and no taxes and all that stuff, it depends on the contract. I've had contracts before where they gave you a car. Okay, they gave you an apartment, they gave you a car, like your own vehicle. I just had different. It all depends on the contract, but you can get. My thing is, if you're interested in Africa and you come here and it's cheaper to fly to the African country than it is from Africa, and you're getting paid more money and it's a little bit more comfortable, you may find like this is a better transitional plan. I'm just dropping some game on you because you may not have heard this. And this because the reality is, if you're trying to do it from the States, it's hard, man. Every time you go to Africa, it might be $2,000 for just the ticket. So it's easier to be here, and then you check out different countries and see what you like and what you don't like. Or if you do like it, you may go back and forth as you do your research. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Anyway, I'm not gonna hold you too long. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Expat D. Like, share, subscribe. Let's just get this channel to grow. Yeah, I'm gonna end it here. So peace and I'm out.